What is up?
What's going on, man? Hey, we're doing a little bit different today. No John Jansen. He's got to go.
Where am I?
I don't
Where am I? What's going on here?
I don't know what to do with my hands here. This is strange. It's so strange. It's all right though. We're gonna have some fun today.
I'm excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me as usual. I appreciate it.
Oh,
I came in, what was it? I don't know, 2 weeks ago I popped in on your chat and I'm like, hey
yeah.
guys, how's it going? So we're here. I'm back. Let's do this thing. Let's talk Showdown. This is my Washington football team. I should have some
Yeah.
heightened knowledge here, right? I should. I
I,
don't, but I
I
should.
hey, I do believe you follow the Washington football team pretty close. I have a feeling you have some good takes on them today. So let's make a little bit of money. Let's see if Warner Bros can take down another showdown tournament again today.
That's right. So you tell me. Where do we start? How do you guys start the show? You guys start from the top or from a pricing standpoint?
Yeah, we kind of talk about our preferred captains and then our flex plays. Just where do we see the areas to attack and how we need to kind of fill in our lineups and tell the story of a showdown slate.
Yeah, that makes sense. So tell me, what's your preferred captain? Where are you starting? Because I have a few guys I have in mind. I would say probably one in particular that I like the best. But there's definitely, I think, 2 to maybe 4 guys that are in play.
For me, I think my favorite captain today is probably going to be it's either going to be Terry McLaurin, going to be Antonio Gibson. The idea of actually taking the Washington side of this tonight. Russell Wilson was a little bit he was a little wobbly when he first, his first game back with that finger surgery, and he might still be feeling the effects of that a little bit. So I prefer attacking the Washington side of it on the captains.
I totally agree with that. I think the interesting thing on Russell Wilson is if you're playing a few lineups and you do want to get contrarian, I mean, picture a scenario where Russell Wilson has sort of come around and finally the finger is feeling good. He's gotten plenty of reps with DK and Tyler Lockett, Gerald Everett and company. And then all of a sudden he explodes against the Washington secondary that really isn't very good. The defense has played a lot better the last few weeks, actually, but the secondary is nothing to write home about. So I agree with you. The Washington captains are definitely the way to go. But I do think there's a scenario where Seattle becomes, at least offensively, Seattle becomes the offense that we kind of knew last year. And DK and Lockett and Russell just explode. And so if you have one of those 3 guys, let's say Russ in your captain spot, and you happen to roster those 2 receivers, you fit in a couple of Washington guys. This is all game script dependent, right? So if Washington's trailing, all of a sudden maybe you want to roster J.D. McKissick, and we'll talk about him, and maybe some other second or third tier receivers because you won't have much money to go around. That's one way to do it. But I agree with you. I think it's Gibson. I think it's McLaurin. I think Taylor Heineke is a possibility as a captain.
Yeah.
He's not gonna throw for a ton of yards most likely, but he definitely has some touchdown equity with his arm and maybe with his legs as well. And in a game where I think it's going to be relatively low scoring, at least relative to the total, I think Taylor Heineke's in play as a captain.
I think that's fair. I was actually he's kind of is one of my guys, kind of an outlier that I might put in one or two builds as a captain, because Seattle's not going to stop anybody from running the football. That's never been what they do. It's Legion of Boom days, even back then that was more based around their secondary, and they were nowhere near that nowadays. So the idea of attacking both of these passing games is something that I'm all for today.
Yeah, it makes sense. Let me ask you, the total's rotating, I think, around 47 and a half. Do you like the under here? Because usually when we talk about passing games, we're talking about, kind of higher scoring, especially with just secondaries that are both banged up and not very good. I've been leaning on the under so far. I think both teams will try to establish the run, but I think Washington is also prone to maybe some longer drives. And I think that's just, there's going to be a lot of clock ticking. But I'm happy to hear an argument to the over, because I haven't really decided on the under yet. Are you thinking this might get into the 50s, or are you thinking we're talking mid 40s here?
I'm thinking mid 40s. I mean, honestly, both of these teams have been two of the slower paced teams in the NFL this year,
Mhm.
and Pete Carroll, to his detriment, is going to try and burn clock off. He's not going to utilize Russell Wilson to his full full abilities in the passing game. He's going to want to get, Alex Collins. He's going to want to get the running backs going, no matter what the scenario is. So I do like the idea of taking the under on it. Probably, between 44 and 46 is where I'm gonna see it kind of ended up tonight.
And what about this question from Jesse? Jesse, thanks for watching. Jesse's a big fan of our PGA Golf show as well, and he's a big Win Daily supporter. So appreciate that. Would you play a lineup with both Gibson and McKissick? Stoby, where you at on that?
I wouldn't go overkill on that, but I do think that you could, if Washington kind of establishes it early, first half, runs Antonio Gibson, maybe he gets one in for a score. He gets, 14 to 16 carries and has himself a pretty good night. But then in the second half, Seattle makes some adjustments. Washington gets behind in a hurry. Then I could see them using JD McKissick, throughout the entire fourth quarter in 2-minute kind of hurry up style offense. So I wouldn't go overkill on it, but I do think you could do that in a build or two if you were doing, say, 10 to 15 builds.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you're doing 10 builds, or even if you're doing like 6, I think doing one with both of them might make sense. But the problem with McKissick is, well, first of all, McKissick is establishing himself as a runner a little bit too. I think he had 7 carries last week. With that said, though, I mean, to me, it's either an Antonio Gibson game or a JD McKissick game. And I don't want to get too locked into game script this, game script that. But generally speaking, I think that's what we're going to see. And the question becomes, can both of them pop and pay off? Can both of them pay off their prices? And I don't think so. I think if JD McKissick was priced down a bit, like instead of 7,200 on DraftKings, if he was like 4,800, then I think we have a conversation. But it's not something I'm going to be really looking to. I think if Gibson is very successful, I think what you're looking at is a Gibson game. And I think if the Washington defense wilts, then I think you're looking at more of a McKissick game.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, definitely don't go overkill on it. Don't make that like a build that you're going to do in 70-80% of your lineups, because that's a very much an outlier. It'll be a very unique lineup, and there won't be a whole lot of people that are going to be running something like that in a showdown build. But yeah, go ahead, try it in 1 or 2 if you're doing multis. The one thing that I'm seeing with this pricing is it is really going to be difficult to not have to do any sort of dumpster diving for your last player or maybe 2 players, because a lot of these guys are just priced way up. This is very tight even for DraftKings. And I'm just trying to figure out, who down here, down towards the bottom, is going to be a solid value for your flex spots, like your final piece.
So I do want to mention, and this isn't really where you're going, but I do want to mention DJ Dallas as a really solid pivot off of Alex Collins at a much cheaper price. I mean, we know he's getting a lot more playing time over the last few weeks, and honestly, Alex Collins just hasn't been very good, averaging 3.3 yards per carry. He just hasn't been good. I mean, you can roster him. Listen, Seattle might get 1 or 2 PIs because the Washington can't cover DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and then boom, all of a sudden Alex Collins is on the 1-yard line. So that can happen. But in terms of him really having a great game against this Washington run defense, I don't see it. So Stoby, I know that's not where you were going. If I'm going really, really low, there's maybe one guy that's really kind of coming to mind, and it's Will Dissly. If I just have to, like, if I have less than 1,000, and I just have to find somebody that I think might get a target or 2. Obviously, Will Dissly is not the primary tight end. That's why he's 600. But I do think he could potentially factor into this game, with a couple targets and maybe some red zone targets. The problem with the Washington pass catchers is, they're kind of priced up a little bit more than they should be. Like your John Bates's, he's the backup tight end, of course, but he'll get some run this week because Ricky Seals-Jones isn't playing and Logan Thomas is on somewhat of a pitch count. But Cam Sims, for example, 3,800. And then you add to the fact that Adam Humphries might play, that Curtis Samuel is going to be in the mix, that Logan Thomas. It's like the pass catchers, you're really taking a chance on these guys because they're all between like 3 and 6,000 in terms of those middling guys. And it's like, well, how much volume are they going to get? So it's really hard for me to justify that play. But I think I love your opinion on this, but I think Will Dissly at 600. I mean, Dwayne Eskridge, I don't think I would go there. Freddie Swain at 2,200 might.
Freddie Swain is somebody that popped a little bit for me. I wouldn't mind taking a few stabs on somebody like Freddie Swain for value. Even, I mean, considering how they've priced everything else up, this is also another one of those situations where I wouldn't particularly mind if you went with a kicker, because both of these teams have shown tendencies of drives stalling out around the 20, right around the red zone when things tighten up. So if you could potentially get 8, 9, 10 points out of these kickers today, I mean, your point per dollar on your value is pretty high on those. And Joey Sly, he can miss kicks from the for the best of them, but he can also hit some 60+ yarders. He was a kicker at Virginia Tech, and he can hit 60+ yard field goals if he can keep it straight.
Yeah, I actually like the Joey Sly play. I think Joey Sly and Jason Myers make sense. One thing I know from the Washington Football Team, and this isn't a knock on Taylor Heineke necessarily, he's willing to sling it, and he's willing to take some chances in the end zone, particularly to Terry McLaurin. But that team also has a tendency to just, like you said, have drives stall a little bit, which is part of the reason I kind of like the under, because I think there can be some longer drives, like 6-7 minute drives that end up ending in a field goal, and then boom, you've taken half the quarter and you only got the potential of 3 points. So I'm kind of thinking Sly makes some sense at 4,200, and I think the way I'm building this week, like I made 3 lineups so far today, and I took some chances on some. Like I think one of them I actually had DJ Dallas as a captain, and that's just kind of like a big tournament. I was just kind of speculating there, but I definitely am going to fit in Joey Sly into a couple lineups. I have a lineup with Dallas as a captain, Taylor Heineke. And it's funny. The third lineup that I thought I had, it's a golf lineup. I see Sam Burns and Victor Hovland. Like, all right, I only made 2 lineups apparently, so I'll make a few more. But
it's like that one's for Thursday. Exactly. That one's for Thursday. Now there is somebody that would you be interested in taking a shot or two on somebody like Logan Thomas now that he's just in like one lineup having him as captain? You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to go too crazy on him, but I mean, would it really be surprising if they did get down into the red zone and they caught, he caught, 3 or 4 targets and he caught a touchdown for like 35 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The problem is there are so many pass catchers now with Logan Thomas being healthy. Curtis Samuel looks like he's going to be active, looks like he's going to be healthy. Yep. And then you got Terry McLaurin, you got Cam Sims, you got, potentially John Bates stealing a couple targets along with JD McKissick. The idea that Logan Thomas comes in and commands his normal volume or even 80% of his normal volume and also scores, a touchdown, I just think the odds of that are low. So my answer to your question is, yeah, it's possible. But if I'm only making 5 or 6 lineups, he's not going to be a captain anyway. I'm going to go run of the mill, like Heineke, Gibson, maybe Russell Wilson or Lockett. And then my contrarian ones are going to be like a DJ Dallas, something like that. Maybe like a JD McKissick. If I think the game script is good for JD McKissick in terms of like, I could put JD McKissick at captain and then stack some Seattle pass catchers with Russ and then kind of go from there. Again, that's a more of a game script dependent play there, but Logan Thomas isn't really going to break the mold there for me.
Okay. All right. I know it's kind of a stab, like an MME, big GPP type of thing. I was just wondering if how close he is to feeling like himself after being out for so long.
I know why you brought him up, by the way, because you went to Virginia Tech and you can't help yourself. And you got to bring up Virginia Tech Hokies. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, Logan Thomas was a quarterback at Virginia Tech, a pretty good one, by the way.
Yes.
He got drafted as a quarterback, if memory serves correctly, in the NFL. And it just didn't work out. I actually, looking at the landscape of backup quarterbacks, it's just a shout out to Virginia Tech in general. He could absolutely be a backup quarterback in this league, if not, maybe a third string practice squad guy. He has that talent, which I guess he should be the emergency quarterback for the Washington Football Team. But long story short, I think Logan Thomas is a great player. I'm just not sure this is the matchup
this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Oh, the only reason I think he could have been a quarterback, but he got out. He left a year early. He hadn't developed.
Yeah.
Um,
I will say this though, real quick. He played with David Wilson, right?
yes, he did. David Wilson. Actually, he came from my hometown. Went to my high school.
Wow.
Yep.
What's the name of your hometown?
George Washington High School out of Danville, Virginia.
Danville,
That's
Virginia. Okay.
that's
I'm
actually
familiar
where
with it.
That's where Herman Moore went to high school too.
UVA grad Herman Moore, right?
Uh-huh.
So I went to James Madison University, which is Harrisonburg, and some of my fraternity
Mhm.
brothers were actually from Danville. But the I will say this: the one compelling thing about Logan Thomas, and by the way, I only brought up David Wilson because he was awesome, and if not for a very unfortunate play where he sustained a
Yes.
neck injury chasing a bad snap to Eli Manning, if it wasn't for that particular play in that particular moment, he'd probably still be in the NFL and he'd be a productive running back at least for 5 to 7 years. So
Oh
just
yeah,
super unfortunate.
he was the fastest guy I have ever seen in my life. Like just from 0 to 100, I've never seen anybody. He got out of the NFL when he retired. He actually went to go try out at the Olympics after that for
Mhm.
the I believe it was either hurdle or triple jump. I can't remember which one, but he went to go try and get in the following Olympics. He just missed out.
I will say this about Logan Thomas. You're obviously never going to find him at 4,800 on a slate like this. So I get that. I
Mhm.
think I'd be willing to play him. I just don't know that I'd be willing to play him as a captain. Can he go
That's
off?
fair.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd rather just play him as a flex play, not a captain.
That's fair. I mean, that's a fair middle ground. I mean, captain might be a little bit too much, but it's just I'm sitting here looking at this pricing, and it's. I mean, we're gonna have to get ugly on a couple of them. So now,
Absolutely.
what are the odds that both we see like what we saw last night, and both of these teams kind of stall out offensively, and we get a not a defensive game, but like a really low scoring game.
I think they're pretty good odds, but the problem is I don't know that these defenses, if that's where you're going, I don't know if these defenses can really create the points that we're going to want to
Enough.
justify the plays. I think for Washington, if Montez Sweat and Chase Young were actually healthy, then it would be a different story. But it's a good run defense. They'll probably create some pressure on Russell Wilson, but their pressure rate isn't going to be very good. And therefore, I don't think the turnovers are really going to be in play, especially against the Seattle team that keeps it a little close to the vest. I think if
Mhm,
you were going to play a defense, Seattle would make a little bit more sense because
mhm.
Heineke has that sort of Brett Favre gunslinger mentality in him. And it's great when it works, and it's not
Yep.
so great when it doesn't work. He's a little
No, yeah.
cavalier with the football. He'll throw to Terry McLaurin in double coverage. He doesn't care because Terry's an absolute beast. But
Mhm.
when you do stuff like that, sometimes the ball gets tipped or a DB makes a good play and you get turned over.
Yep. That's fair. Okay, and that was along the lines of what I was thinking, whether or not they could produce enough outside of just the low points total that would be worth taking any sort of shot at. And I didn't really feel like it was gonna be a thing, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Let me ask you this from a receiver standpoint. I think Terry McLaurin makes sense. I mean, I think he makes sense as a fade as well. If you just
Mhm.
think, well, listen, everybody's going to roster Terry McLaurin. He makes sense, and we don't really know what's going on with all the other receivers and pass catchers for Washington in terms of volume. But what I really want to ask you, I think what a lot of people listening might want to know is, well, how do we decide between Lockett and DK Metcalf? Do you have sort of a play you're going to make? You're locking in one over the other, or maybe you're playing 10 lineups and 7 of them are going to have one guy and 3 are going to have the other.
Um, I am going to. I'm probably going to have more DK Metcalf than Tyler Lockett, just because it always seems like when your quarterback is kind of struggling with accuracy, which I think Russ is going to have an issue with at least for a little while. He's going
Mhm.
to target the bigger guys. Just get the extra height matters. But if I in the lineups that I do play Tyler Lockett, I'm going to play him as a captain because Tyler Lockett is one of these guys it's boomer bust. It's just like when I was talking about yesterday with Hollywood Brown. I'm either
Mhm.
going to start him as a captain or I'm not going to play him in the lineup at all because he's either going to get you 30 DK points or he's going to get you 3. There's not really a whole lot of in between, and Lockett's one of those types of guys. So I love putting him in a few spots at captain, but I'm going to have a lot more DK Metcalf in my builds overall than Tyler Lockett.
That makes sense. I think DK can absolutely manhandle these corners. With that said, he hasn't been getting a ton of the targets. as of late since Russ has been back. But again, it doesn't take much for either of those two guys to go off. I totally agree with you that playing either of them really in the captain spot makes sense because we know they can go off. And honestly, I think Lockett could get loose now that I'm thinking about it in this secondary quite a bit. So I think they're both good plays. I don't think you can really play both unless you're going just like, super stack with Russ and those two guys and whatnot. But man, I'm like 50-50 on them. I'm leaning Lockett, but I think they're both really solid plays. You're probably not going to be right on both, so you have to make a decision.
Yeah. And with the price, I mean, you're asking for a lot. You're talking about, rostering Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf. You're not going to have a lot of salary left for anything else if you're rostering those guys. So you kind of have to plant your flag on one or the other. Like I said,
so
it's just Lockett's just a captain only type of play for me. So
I just put Russ at captain, which is obviously super expensive in its own right, and then I put Lockett and Metcalf in the lineup. It leaves me with 4,800 to go. which is obviously not very much. So you could just from a pure game script standpoint, you'd almost be telling yourself, well, I have to spend some money on McKissick. And then that leaves you with 3,650 for each player, which means you have to basically punt on. You could do Logan Thomas and still have some money left over. You could do DeAndre Carter if you think he is going to get more reps than Curtis Samuel, which he very well might. But let's go Logan Thomas for some easy targets for Heineke. That leaves you 2,200. So you could continue to stack with Seattle with Freddie Swain, or you could go down to, like I mentioned, Will Dissly, which I probably like Swain a little bit better than that. But yeah, I mean, that lineup actually works if you want to do it. It's just a matter of if you want to play. I think you almost have to play J.D. McKissick with that game script. And then the next question is, do you want to play Logan Thomas? Or maybe if the game is that out of hand, do they just kind of lessen the reps for Logan Thomas? Maybe. And then you put in you could put in a DeAndre Carter, for example, who is probably like in a blowout. Does Curtis Samuel play a full amount of reps?
I was actually getting ready to say that. You would take these guys on the limited reps and you would kind of assume that fourth quarter, they're probably going to protect them because they know it's out of hand. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So if you were to do that, DeAndre Carter is more expensive than Logan Thomas. So you'd have to come off of, let's see, who was it that we just talked about? Oh, Freddie Swain. And then that's where you'd probably have to go to, you'd have to go to Dissly. You'd have 1,100 left over. But that's not a terrible lineup if you think there's a possibility that Seattle just rolls this squad.
Oh yeah. That's not bad at all. If you're going on complete onslaught, thinking that Seattle just mows over them. Yeah, that's not bad at all. I don't see a ton of scenarios where Washington is going to do this, do that to Seattle, but there's a few different situations where Seattle can do that to Washington.
Totally agree with that.
Let me see. Any questions today? I wonder if we got no, I don't think we got any questions today. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, we got the Gibson and McKissick question. If there are any other questions, let us know. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we covered the potential for kickers. We covered the high end guys. We covered the low end guys. I mentioned DJ Dallas, and I think he's a really interesting pivot off of Alex Collins because especially if the game gets out of hand a little bit on the Washington end. And I don't mean like, we just talked about they're not going to blow them out by 20, but if they're up like 10 points, for example, it becomes probably the DJ Dallas show. And for the record, we don't know. It might be the DJ Dallas show anyway. We might see them splitting carries 50-50. I'm not so sure that's an impossibility this week.
Yeah, Alex Collins has not given us anything to say that he deserves that starting job. So
correct.
Why not go ahead and get your pass catching guy out there who can run a little bit? I mean, he's looked better than what Alex Collins has in limited work. So yeah, Carroll's got to do something.
DJ Dallas had a 37% snap share last week. The last few weeks, Alex Collins' snap share has dwindled. And not only that, but you have injuries to Rashad Penny and Travis Homer. So even if Alex Collins gets his full complement of snaps, you're going to see some uptick with DJ Dallas regardless. So it's just one of those things where why not just see what you have in DJ Dallas? He's still kind of a young player, and he could be one of the featured running backs for your team in the future. This might be a good time, given their record, their win-loss record, to find out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And DJ Dallas has better touchdown odds than somebody like J.D. McKissick, Gerald Everett.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's telling.
yeah,
That's really
yeah.
telling to me.
He's just a hair. Well, actually, he's got better touchdown odds, anytime touchdown odds than even Curtis Samuel. Um, yeah, there's only like 5 or 6 guys ahead of him as far as the props go tonight. So it looks
So
like, trust Vegas. Trust Vegas. If they see something, you got to follow them sometimes. They know what they're doing. They make more money than we do doing this.
totally agree. By the way, this line just ticked up to -2. So some money's coming in on Seattle, and the over-under is now 46.5. So you know what that
So it
means?
is down. Yeah.
That means apparently DraftKings Sportsbook is watching this show and they got really scared about
That's
our
what it is.
what we dropped, the knowledge we dropped on the under. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're wrong. Somebody probably got fired, actually. So my
Yeah,
apologies to whoever that
that's
was.
that's all us. Our bad. We we
Yeah,
all-
sorry.
we all know DK watches us every week. They get their they get their odds from us. So
Obviously. No, but I think that covers it, man. The one thing I'll say about DJ Dallas, though, and this is just historical, so it could be something different. If you're going to do a touchdown for DJ Dallas, an anytime touchdown, don't do first touchdown, do anytime touchdown. The reason is
Mhm.
because typically what Pete Carroll will do is he'll trot out Alex Collins for the first couple drives, just kind of no matter what. You won't see DJ Dallas much until maybe late first quarter, second quarter. And by the way, that's maybe when they actually end up scoring their touchdown. I don't know, but it's just something to consider.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's fair. That's Pete Carroll's. He's hard headed.
He
He's
is. He's old
it's
school.
yeah. He takes a little while to get going.
All right, man. Well, that was fun. I'm gonna have
Oh
to
yeah.
crash this. I'm gonna have to crash this party more often than not the rest of the way because this is good.
Oh
I still
yeah.
got to make some
Yeah.
lineups, so like I kind of needed
Oh yeah.
this.
All right. Yeah, I gotta go build a few too because I told you, I got off work and hopped right on here in the stream. So
That's right.
you're always welcome. See, you're always welcome.
I appreciate it, guys. So okay, thanks for watching the Showdown stream, and we at Win Daily Sports will catch you next time. See
Yep.
you.